I'm going to put it on full screen. There we go. Ah, hey, now I feel like I'm on top of the world, buddy.
Yeah,
Because
this is the first one you've done from the computer, huh?
yeah, because all the other ones have been from my phone. So I'm glad, man. So this way I ain't gonna try to aim that fucking thing.
Right.
I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said the F word probably. Hey, look at that shirt you're wearing. AEP. Look at
Yes,
that, buddy.
sir.
Man,
Even
that was a good place to work, I thought.
yeah, I was only part of it for 6 months, but the safety lady had, I think, five of these left over she gave me. So
Oh yeah.
anyway,
Down there, who was that safety lady back then? I forget. It doesn't matter, I don't guess.
uh,
You're talking about down to golf, right? You joined from down to golf, didn't
yeah,
you?
Connie Thibodeau, I think her name was.
Oh yeah. That's right. Because she helped me once with renewing my license. I was down there into golf, and she gave me, she was the person to contact for that. Where did you work out of convent?
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah, for about two and a half years, I think. But I was only with AEP for 6 months. That's when they sold.
Oh, because HBO bought them out.
Right.
Gotcha. Okay, so you were there for the acquisition, and I didn't
I
realize that. That
I
would have
got
been
2015.
2015 or
Yeah, it was
15.
mid 15. I came on knowing that they were for sale. We just didn't know to whom yet. But here we are a few years later.
Yeah, a couple.
How's life been since our meeting with John Esser?
It's been interesting to say the least. And I did contact John because I felt bad. John had reached out to me a couple times, checking on to see if I was able to find any help from his resources. And I didn't reply back, and I felt bad because I didn't want him to think I was ignoring him. I just sometimes I find it difficult to be able to reply sometimes. Anyway, I finally got a hold of him though via text and just let him know that I hadn't gone that avenue. And rather than going into a long text to explaining to him as to why, I can tell it now is I wound up not having to go that avenue because I went another avenue that I didn't even know existed at that point in time. And some of these things have have changed and come to fruition because of recent changes with the VA specifically. It was April the 24th, I think, that the VA secretary came out in a press release conference about folks with other than honorable discharges, like the one I have. And I think that was April 24th. It wasn't but like the next day, I think, April 25th, whatever day was on a Friday, that it's kind of a side story, a collateral story, but one that I probably should mention to be forthright and whatnot is my cousin Bridget. She knew I wasn't really in a good mindset, I guess, and for lack of a better term, kidnapping. She came over on a Friday and kidnapped me to take me to the VA to get evaluated because of my mindset. I'll let you read between the lines on that, but whenever that happened, like I say, unbeknownst to me, the day before, just 2 days prior, within 48 hours, the VA secretary came out with this speech. Come to find out, it was one that could potentially help me in my situation. Because, Tim, when you have a service member, a veteran with an honorable discharge, it's cut and dry. They get all the benefits, right? The GI Bill, home loans, whatever. You get it all, the whole kit and caboodle. If you get dishonorable, that's cut and dry. You get zilch, zero, nothing, nada, right? Now, There are like 5 different discharges. Honorable being the one that a person would get after they completed their obligated service without any hiccups, and they've done their time that they signed up for, right? That's honorable. Underneath that, it's called general. General would be for something like, say, medical sometimes. You know, like say if you joined the Navy and you went to your schools and whatnot, and you came out to the ship, let's say you got chronic seasickness and you were sick all the time. You couldn't be out to sea that way. They would have to medically discharge you. I saw that happen. That's why I'm giving that as an example, that fella probably got a general discharge because he couldn't go out to sea. He's not doing the Navy any fucking good, but it's not his fault. You know what I'm saying? So that's where you would get a general, honorable general. And then underneath a general is other than honorable. Now, the key to the first 3 that I mentioned, they're all administrative. Okay, so that's done by paperwork, those first 3. The last 2, the next one underneath, other than honorable, is what they call a bad conduct discharge. BCD. We used to call it big chicken dinner. That's a punitive discharge. That's not administrative any longer, to my knowledge. I think that's punitive, meaning you got in some sort of trouble, maybe even out in town on your hours off, maybe got caught drinking and driving or something like that. There would be a legal aspect to it. Dishonorable is the last one, and that's the one where you have done something wrong, like a felony, something along those lines, murder. I mean, you name it, right? So what the VA secretary said in his press release conference was the honorable and the dishonorable, cut and dry, that they were going to focus on folks that had other than honorable, to try to give some people a chance that maybe in the past weren't able to, for whatever reasons that we had within the laws in the country and the way of life then, that they might be eligible now. For example, the don't ask, don't tell because of sexual orientation. Whenever I was in, that was policy. So people were discharged for that reason if they were homosexual. Well, now homosexuals can openly serve. So if someone was discharged with an other than honorable because they said they were homosexual at the time, that's punitive. Well, they can resubmit a claim now, for example, to get a few benefits. They won't get all of them, but they'll get some. Well, that was one of the categories that he mentioned. He said, I want to make sure that, that the VA, what they call the raters and the decision makers, I guess, the regional offices and whatnot, that they're going through the other than honorables, and there are statutory and regulatory bars that will automatically bar someone from benefits. Automatically. My discharge was misconduct. That was the title, due to drug abuse. When it's misconduct, that's a statutory, I think that's statutory bar. Either way, it bars you. However, what it shows in the Code of Federal Regulations and the CFR and for their guidelines that they have to follow, I think it's 38 CFR, I believe. Either way, the misconduct has to be willful and persistent. It has to be both of those, right? To be what they call dishonorable for VA purposes, okay? That would be someone who, let's say, joins and from the get-go they just have problems. They're insubordinate, not conforming, they're late, they're getting trouble drinking, they're hitting their wife, whatever. but they've been in a ration of shit and then they were discharged. They're probably not going to get anything because that was a persistent pattern, right? Whereas in my case, and I'm not saying this to toot my horn, but this is why I thought I had a chance, was because my situation was one like the secretary had mentioned on his press conference. Was I had my first three years were good service with good conduct. I had great evals. I scored well. I was never late for work. Whenever we were in port tied off and I lived out in town, I wasn't ever late. You know, I didn't get in trouble with the law. And then and then after the helicopter crash, when I tried to regulate my sleep schedule, that's that they looked at that. The VA did, by the way. So going back to all this, my cousin takes me. I find all this shit out in a matter of like 3 days of what the process is, kind of, and start educating myself. And here's what I found out, and here's what has happened. That's, I think, it's been a good thing. It's been a great thing, actually, but it's not over yet, if that makes sense. So when a person has to file a claim, a veteran does, the VA will not reach out to you for this. But hypothetically, myself, for example, when I was discharged, I was given my service jacket and said, "See you later," type of thing. I didn't get any transitioning out or any major, I was just told from the local ship guy, our administrative guy, he was enlisted as well. He just said, "Charlie, you're not going to be eligible for any benefits." And I took that for what it was. I broke their rule while I was in by using drugs. So that's what I went through my life thinking I wasn't eligible. So here's what they're suggesting, and here's what I did. And the first step of it has been a good outcome. Was if someone has an other than honorable, but you want to apply for, say, healthcare, let's just say for example, in my case, my cousin drove me to the VA. I wasn't in the system at all because I've never filed a claim. I've always thought I've been ineligible, so I never even went to the VA ever, And what happened on that day, that kickstarted a process. And come to find out what they do, the first thing that they do, let's say that you show up at a hospital, is that they're going to check your eligibility. In my case, it didn't have me as eligible because I wasn't in the system. So they had to determine my eligibility. They do that through what's called a character of discharge review. And what that means is they're going to look at your service record and see what type of discharge you have. And like I said earlier, if you got an honorable or dishonorable, it's cut and dry. But if you got an other than honorable, right, what they can do at the VA level, right, at the VA level for healthcare only, they set up their review process, and they did mine fairly quick. I think within maybe 2 weeks, I had a response in the mail. They won't send it to you any other way but the mail, I found out. But on the VA level, they'll look at why you were discharged. In my case, it was misconduct. They didn't see willful and persistent because I sent in the evidence of my evals and whatnot with my claim, And here's the wording, the verbiage, that the language you have to use in order to get by this part, is that they said on their letter, after careful review of my case, that they found my service not dishonorable for VA reasons. That's how it's got to read, because on my discharge papers, it says other than honorable. What they're trying to find out is, was my service up until the time I was out, was it honorable or not? And it was, I didn't get in any trouble, and I did my job above and beyond a lot of times. So they found that, and that's what they decided. Now, that opened up a window for me for VA healthcare from the VA from the VA from the VHA side only. The VBA, which is the Veterans Benefits Administration, they're like the grand poobah. I won't be eligible for those things like the GI Bill, home loans, and whatnot. None of that shit. But what they did automatically, which I'm thankful for, is they gave me a presumptive, what they call a presumptive status when they saw me on that Friday, that I am available. Any health care that I want that's mental is available to me. Anything along those lines for PTSD, substance abuse, anything that's mentally related, I can go to right now with no costs. If I go, say, if I want to go to the doctor because I've got a sore toe or I've got a cold, I've been approved now to do that as well, right? For physical reasons. But like anyone who has private insurance has to pay a co-payment and whatnot, certain fees for meds, I would have to do that. What's happening now? So the good part is, for the VA reasons, they have found my service not dishonorable. So now I've got that going. But what's in the process right now that's still awaiting, I guess you'd say, completion, and there are a couple of things on my part still I've got to send in, is why, but it still is going to be a timely process on the VA's part, is my claim. And that claim, for the claim is for, by the way, it's for monthly compensation for PTSD, for my inabilities to do certain things on these current times. That if they also determine that I'm disabled and they approve my claim, if they do, in that event, Tim, I understand that from that point on, the healthcare co-payments and stuff for physical stuff, if it's anything related to PTSD, that's called service connection. If it's service connected, then they will pay for it. The VA will. So they haven't determined that yet. That's what's still it's kind of looming right now and being juggled in the air. But that's where my claim is sitting. And if things go, I guess you'd say, well, they'll send me to an exam, and their doctor or whomever will determine whatever they see, if I'm disabled or not, and go from there.
Do you mind discussing a little bit more on that helicopter crash? I have a follow-up
No,
question.
yeah, I don't mind. Give her a shot. I'll answer what I can. Go ahead, buddy.
Well, Charlie, you mentioned the helicopter crash, which has been discussed a fair amount in previous episodes, but I don't know that it was ever covered on a recording about the aftermath of it. If I remember correctly, not only were you directing traffic on deck, but you were also the driver for the rescue boat.
Yeah. So what had happened? We were out to sea, and well, of course we were out to sea, but when you're out to sea, Tim, and I was on a frigate, 450 foot long. It didn't take much, man. We bobbed around pretty good. Well, so my hat's off to the pilots for the amount of times that they landed and took off without crashing. I still have a lot of respect for them, because that's difficult, I think, to try to deal with those elements. But we were in some regular seas. They weren't rough, but they were enough that we were doing our normal thing, and we were getting ready to do a normal operation that we called VBSS. And that meant, what that means is visit, board, search, and seizure. And on that particular launch, and so what happens when you do a VBSS? The first thing is that you launch the bird. He'll go to the contact that you're going to board, and he'll do an aerial view to count all the crew members that the captain said was on board, and he's kind of being a scout for you, let's just say. That was where we were at, starting off an operation for the day. And when he went to take off, he started lifting off. And I don't know all the buttons and controls, but something happened. Operator error, something happened, and his foot or something slipped off that fucking pedal, or I don't know, buddy. But the bird started doing a 360. And when it did, I was in the middle because I was signalman / flight deck officer, whatever you want to call it. But I was in the middle. I was a signalman. On each side of me were a guy with chalk and chains, right? They had just removed the chalk and chains. They're back alongside me with, I don't know, 2 or 3 feet behind us are the hangar bay doors. They're closed, and all you got is steel bulkhead between where you're at and behind you. So when it started to do the 360 and that tail rotor came around, my first reaction was I threw an arm out to each side and to push the guys back with myself and take our body weight and fall back, because we didn't have far to go back before that fucking tail rotor would come around and hit one of us in the head. And then it came around again, and it hit the guard shack, the control tower, which is on the second level. That's where one of the other pilots would be sitting for the aircraft, but they would be staying on the ship. You know, they were like they were the aircraft flight controllers. And on that second time, when it hit the control tower, and then the bird started getting, sideways enough that with the main rotor still going, it started hitting the deck. The rotor did. And I said, fuck this, boys. Let's run in. And we did. And then I closed the door. I closed the door. And then I watched through the little porthole that we had. It was about the size of maybe a Coke can or something. And I was watching, and that fucking bird, his tail rotor was fucking fucked or whatever, but it was starting to bounce towards the stern, and that bird did a somersault into the sea. Whenever that happened, right away, I didn't even have to think about it, because we drill and train so much in the military, man, that you do it so that you can be ready, so that you don't think. You don't even think about you just automatically react to whatever. And so I started hightailing it up to the boat deck, because I knew we were going to have to try to get them boys out. And then I just gotta catch my breath for a minute. Elizeki. Oh, that was his name. There was a seaman. We had Elizeki and a Filipino fella. And I remember when I got up to the boat deck that I had heard him say, "Oh, it's just a drill." He had been talking with a couple other shipmates trying to catch the R&R because they were on the boat deck already because we were going to have to launch the boat for part of the boarding. That was a given. So the boat was as ready as it could be, which was to our advantage. But that's because I knew I was going to have to drive that fucker. I just didn't have to expect to drive it under these conditions. And the boys that were standing by on the boat deck team, because they were always there waiting for me. When I got up there, that's when I heard Elizeki say, "Oh, it's just a drill," and I said, "This ain't no drill, boys." And man, I was ripping my flight gear off, my little vest and all that other bullshit, and putting my boat gear on. And I'm so glad we didn't have the motor whaleboat anymore. That thing was like a dinosaur. It was like an old boat where you had to crank the motherfucker. And I shouldn't say that. The motor whaleboats were dependable, but they were old school. This was one of the newer ones, like ACBL for their lifeboats. They have what they call Zodiacs. That's what they call them. The company does, Zodiacs. We had the same design in the U.S. Navy, and those replaced the motor whaleboats. Man, these things, it was on. Whenever when you fired one of them things up and you push that throttle forward, you're going somewhere, buddy. You better fucking hang on. And that was our craft, man. Our lifeboat, our assault craft, everything. That was our one. We didn't need anything more than that. That was a little fighting motherfucker right there, buddy. And I left the ship with an engineer, a signalman, and a gunner's mate for Shark Watch. And then we went over to the wreckage, and whenever we got closer, I started raising the engine a little bit because the sun reflects off the sea and it can fuck up your ability to make out what it is in front of you. If it's something just shiny or if it's the sun, you don't know. And so I raised it up, and I raised up the engine, and we killed her and just started floating. And then I could see at that point what was debris and what was people. I think that's all I can do for now, Timmy.
Well, you want to catch your breath for a second? I've got a follow-up question that I don't think I ever asked on air before. But did y'all get everybody out that day?
Yeah, I saved everyone that day. We saved everyone that day. We did. They're all alive. Alive.
Does that not give you some?
That makes me feel good. I'm glad to know that they're alive because it makes me feel like even though I got discharged on a misconduct for drug abuse, that at least it happened for a good reason. It didn't happen in vain because I'm glad that I was able to be there that day for those guys, because had I not been, then, and I'm not saying someone wouldn't have been there in my place, they would have been, and I hope. But that's one of the things that has made it somewhat bearable, is to know that there was a good outcome, I think, for them.
That's a massive outcome. That's more than good, man. That's a flight crew, you know.
I pulled 2 guys out of the water as a civilian, man, off the river boats. Sure enough, I pulled one out in my fucking underwear. He was about the size of John Candy or one of them fellers, I think. I was on a small boat down in the ditch. We were just coming out of the sand jack, about to head into fucking Houston when he fell over. I was in a dead sleep. And man, how he grabbed that stern bumper is beyond me, but he did. And I had I had one leg on each side of the bulwark. I was straddling it in my tidy whities because I remember looking down on at him and his eyes were wide open, man. And he was trying not to suck all that water in. That was the captain had done knocked the engines out of gear. I was in my rack when he hit the alarm. And when I ran up there, I didn't even have to ask. I just said, hey, he goes, port side, Charlie, port side. And I ran down there in my skivvies, and there were like 3 bumpers on the stern of that little piece of shit we were on, the Wolf, and grabbed a hold of the last one. And I hiked a leg over, and I had another one still on board, and I crunched my legs together like a scissors, you know. And I reached down. I kept one hand on the vessel, and I reached one arm down. But I looked at him and I said, I'm going to get you out of there, buddy. I'm going to get you out of there. I said, but don't pull me in. I said, you need to calm down for just a minute because your big ass is going to pull me in this fucking water and we're both going to be fucked. So just calm down and before I reach down. And he concurred in his own way. And then I reached down with my left hand and I grabbed a handful of ass crack. And when I knew I had that, I reached out with my right hand that I had on the vessel and I grabbed the back of his work vest and I hauled that motherfucker on board. And that was hernia number 3, I think. 2 or 3. I've had 3 of them. That was hernia 2. Yeah. I'm sorry, Timmy. Say that again. What were you saying, buddy?
You had mentioned you pulled a couple of people out of the water there in the river. Were there some other stories to share?
Well, now that I'm thinking, well, yes and no. Yes, there is another story, but I just realized by saying that first story that because I said names and stuff, I shouldn't have just now. But maybe you can bleep the names out. I don't know because, and I'll tell you why is because I can say why. Fuck it, I'm grown. Is that this was 20 years ago on the one I just mentioned. That hernia, no one knew he fell in that day. The captain kept that under cover. He didn't, he resolved. If the crew member wound up being fine, he chalked it up as a day at the office. But in reality, you should report that not only to your office, but to the United States Coast Guard whenever someone falls over. You should. Just so they can keep up with their, not so someone get in trouble, just so they can keep up with their statistics and know what happened and get a lessons learned from it so it doesn't happen to someone else. That's why I look at it as you should. But so I don't want to incriminate anyone right now. But well, I mean, we could always tell stories about some other fuckers like Dave Raines or Steve O'Farrell or who's another one of them son bitches that you've interviewed recently?
Steve O'Farrell was the one that I reached out to you about, that we talked about you and David on his episode. I think I'm going to publish this one before that one comes out, but That's no problem. What do you know about old Steve?
He's a great guy. We've always had a lot of fun together. But I have liked Steve's approach to, I guess, the way that he talks to folks. He was one of the other few captains, I think, like in captains meetings, for example, that I don't know. He's just kind of easygoing guy to get along with. He didn't seem like he would. I never rode a boat with Steve, but we went to enough meetings and talked to one another on the radio enough that we got the chance to know one another, and we have relieved each other. We've done that, but I didn't get a chance to ride with Steve actually, and I think just from my perspective, perception, that Steve would be a good dude to ride with. That he would be a fair captain, someone honest. He'd probably want a guy to get the job done, but you know, still be able to have a joke and fuck off a little. That's what he seemed like to me, and I like that. And I'll never forget one day. I remember his son was getting married, and he was going to take a week off for it. You know, and with technology moving along as fast as it was anyway, Steve was going to the agreement with the office, so there wouldn't be a lot of cost for crew change, and you know, swap it out where it was most convenient for us to not cost money or to stay in a hotel or whatever, and to get ourselves swapped out to where he could still have time to enjoy time with his son, you know, and have travel time. So we decided a week. Anyway, I relieved him, and we went down with 35. He was captain at the time on the Harold Dodd. We went down with 35, picked up a string, and went all the way down with them 40 to because I remember having 40 on that motherfucker going down through Algiers Point. Went down there and stopped on the left ascending across from Algiers. What fucking fleet is that? I forget. But anyway, it's down there on the left. Miro. We stopped at Miro. Of course, you know how they do everything under them boys. They're all on lock lines and shit, leaving lines. I got on the outside of tow, nosed in, and I got relieved there by Steve a week later. But when he relieved me, what I like, I had his personal truck. He had a Dodge Ram. It's a big son of a bitch too. One of them, you know, one of the ones that you expect to see like in a country music video with a guy with a big old hat or something, you know, it's a big old son of a bitch. But what I thought was cool was I Bluetoothed my phone, and this was my first time experiencing. Of course, we all know it now, but it was a hands-free speaker, and I could drive and talk. I was like, oh wow, man! So I had that all the way up to my trip back to get my vehicle out of Paducah to go back home to St. Louis. You know, I thought that was the neatest thing since sliced bread. Driving Steve O'Farrell's truck with speakerphone, hands-free, baby. I thought, man, this guy's living tall. I want to be a captain one day. That's what I thought, you know.
What year would that have been?
It would have been over 10 years ago because I was pilot on the Keith Darling at the time, and I left the Keith Darling in 2014. So it would have been before that. This would have been 12 years ago, maybe. Well, I don't know. We could ask Steve how many years his son's been married. We'll know then. Or how many he's been married and then divorced, unfortunately. Maybe we'll know then.
Roger on that.
It makes me think old Captain Kenny Wright. You say, hey, Kenny, are you married? And you say, Charles, I've been married 9 unhappily times. So many times that I've worn out shoes walking down the aisle. I got scars on my back from all the rice they've thrown at me, you know. I guess Captain Kenny's probably deceased, maybe, or I hope he's still ticking along. He's a Vietnam vet, great guy. Lost his leg on a motorcycle wreck, and I was never a steersman, unfortunately, but I kind of had to learn the hard way on some things. But Kenny had always been there early on in my career for like the first, I don't know, first 5, 6, 7 years as someone that I could call, not necessarily for the navigational aspect of, making a bridge or setting up for a lock, but more along the lines of career, like, hey, I'm over here doing this job, but I've got an opportunity to do this. What would you do if you were me, type of thing? And Kenny would always try to, I would always lean on him kind of for support. And I don't know what happened. Well, I do know what happened was he retired from AEP, but then I still heard him tripping on occasion for Kirby. And then it's like I didn't hear his voice after that, after a couple of years. Maybe he went on ahead and fully retired. Great guy. He was, to my knowledge, if I've got this accurately, so don't quote me on this as being gospel, but Kenny was with another handful of guys, so to speak, back in, I guess, the 80s, that were the first ones to bring eight wide down the river on a regular basis. And he was captain at the time on the Viking Queen or the American Queen. Wait a minute. Viking Queen, or yeah, one of them fucking boats. He was captain on an Arco boat. And then when Pilots Agree happened, are you familiar with Pilots Agree? That happened in 97. That when that happened, to my knowledge, Kenny was pro Pilots Agree. I think he tied his toe off in the trees, and that's when he wound up working for Mimco afterwards. There were a few Artco guys that had tied up their toes that came to work over at Mimco after Pilots Agree, and he was one of them. He took a pilot's job under Captain Porky on the Chris Parsonage. Oh boy, Captain Porky, man. And I don't know, but I'm just speculating. I don't think that they jived or gelled. Man, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall sometimes for one of their watch changes, I'm sure they were professional, especially Captain Kenny, just to make the month go by. But to have to work opposite of someone that maybe you don't gel with, that would be hard on a regular basis. And Captain Porky was difficult to deal with, buddy. Old school Philadelphia, Mississippi. Now, backwoods guy, he don't fuck around. I mean, like, for example, if you want to play cards in the evening, say if you had a nosy chief or someone else that want to go tattletale and say that you were down there gambling, you had coins on the table, Captain Porky would say, no gambling. You can't gamble on this boat. So we took a bunch of toothpicks and we color coded them. We take a little green marker and do in the middle, a little red marker do in the middle. And that was our nickel, dimes, and quarters. We would do toothpicks instead. So, hey, we ain't got no money on the table now, Captain Porky. Type of thing. He was rough, I thought. But he and Captain Robert Posey were the two captains on that boat. And Joe Ruddick, who had been captain over at Arco, I believe on the Sally Archer, and then Captain Kenny, they had become pilots on that boat after Pilots Agree. There were a lot of guys after Pilots Agree that you heard from one company that pretty much, a couple trips later, they were with another company,
And where were you in the middle of all that?
I was kind of at an advantage in some ways and a disadvantage in another, but I'll explain. Was I had just gotten licensed. And now this is through the old former licensing requirements. So I was 22 with this license to run anywhere, but I didn't know shit from Shinola. I had never faced up a boat or done anything before as pilot, ever, but I've got this license to do anything and to run anywhere. Anyway, it kind of worked out to my advantage, but I didn't realize it at the time or know that by me doing it, I was stepping on some of these guys' toes. And here's why. It was because you had some guys, like I was cutting my teeth on the upper, to answer your question. And I was starting to learn the upper as pilot. That the agreement was ride north on my own as pilot. When we got up to turn around, whether that be St. Paul, Quad Cities, wherever, the company would get a posted pilot, a captain off another boat to ride down with me just for moral support as a pecker checker, make sure I'm doing okay type of thing. I got into a van one day thinking that I was going up. And anyway, what I thought was I'm going up to catch a boat. And I had asked if I could come in on my days off and ride south. I wouldn't even ask for any pay or anything. I just wanted to learn the river, with someone that was willing to show me that on my days off. I figured this. The more I work at it early on the front end of it, I can gain that knowledge that much quicker I could be staying on my own watch and making full pilot wages, That was my theory. Well, come to find out, and I didn't know this at the time, but I get in this van to head up to St. Paul, and in the van is another pilot and captain. We get, and I didn't know why, right? I didn't ask. I just figured they're catching the boat with me. Come to find out, the boat that I'm speaking of, when it got up to St. Paul, when the captain and pilot had gotten word from the office that the office was going to send me out to ride down to try to learn, they both said no. They weren't willing to just give away their information to someone that they didn't know. They weren't willing to work with me, because they didn't know me. I guess the office didn't like that. So when we got up there, that pilot and captain were relieved. And I don't know if they lost their jobs after. I have no idea. But you had some guys that were kind of still in that mindset. And I don't blame them for, that their theory is, okay, if you're going to train someone that you really don't know, that didn't spend time for you on deck, that you're helping them out, that they're taking away a potential job from you, that at that point in time, that they thought that the market was flooded with pilots type of thing, to where it would take their job. And so they didn't want to work with anyone if they had been part of the pilots agree, and that was the case that I didn't realize, like I say, that it would be something that would cause them to have to go home. I didn't know that would happen, but not to say I would have changed it. I was just trying to learn, man. I didn't, and I wasn't asking for any pay on my time off. I just said, if you don't mind to feed me while I'm on there, for obvious reasons, I got to fucking eat. But other than that, I didn't expect any daily wages or to pay for my travel to and from the boat. If I'm doing this on my off time, and that's another reason why I think if someone is on a boat and the office is letting you be on there on your time off and you're learning the pilot trade, in my opinion, you should be up there until your eyeballs are bleeding every day with your markers and crayons and whatever it is that you need to make notes, because the knowledge that you're getting, once you're turned loose and you're running your own watch, you don't have anyone to look and say, hey, Cap, how's this look? They're not there type of thing, so take advantage of it while you can. And so because I have a feeling, in my opinion, I think I had a chance to ride with a few of the best, man, that really I'm grateful for to this day. Robert Bird, Ryan Callaghan, these are some ace pilots, and I wasn't offended if the office would say, hey, Charlie, we had a spurt of high water here last week, and because of the river being up, we're going to send Captain Robert on a ride with you. I said, great. I figured, man, if I can learn one thing from this guy, one thing on the 4 days down from Cairo to New Orleans that keeps me out of an accident in the future, then them 4 days of riding with this person was worth it to me. But we all don't think like that. I think in some fucked up ways that others are pretty regulated on. So it's not to say that I'm perfect.
You mentioned living life in foreign ports ashore while your ship was tied up. Any interesting things come to mind from your escapades overseas?
Yeah. Oh boy. Where could I begin? Because I got to tell you, other than being in the NAG, the North Arabian Gulf, other than that, man, I had a chance to have a lot of fun and see a lot of things that there's no way that I could ever afford to see as a civilian. I mean, I really got a chance to see a lot of, and so I'm really glad also that I was in the Navy because I wasn't attached to one base, like a normal job Monday through Friday. It really was an adventure. I mean, if you let it be, it was. I got a chance to see some pristine play. The cleanest the water's ever been in a place that I've seen was Diego Garcia. It's a little dot on the map in the South Pacific. And to my knowledge, I don't think that there's really any population that lives there. It's just a government little thing. We stopped there for fuel, but the water, because there's not been ships there for the last 200 years chipping and painting and putting all their shit in the surrounding waters and whatnot, and polluting the environmental, I guess you'd say, aspect of it. Man, I mean, clear as can be, just beautiful. And there was, and like there were sometimes that I would be amazed because I would think, oh no, this is just my imagination. Like I carried around a 35 millimeter. We didn't have digital cameras back then. I carried around a little 35 millimeter, and that way, if I was out in town, I could take pictures of me and my buddies, drinking, having a good time, touristy things. But it was always one of them disposable ones from the ship store. You got them for like $5 or something. So that way, if you did lose it while you're out drinking or something, just a. But I took a whole bunch of them back when I came back to the States and had them developed. And man, lots of neat things in there. But what was I saying about or what was I leading up to on the camera thing? Oh, anyway, I figured I better take some pictures because my noodle wouldn't always be there like it's not right now to be able to remember all the shit. And some of the nights I remember pretty well. Some of them, just being a young guy experiencing the world. When we would go to somewhere, westernized, like Australia. Australia is pretty close to what life is like here for the most part. That's probably the closest cultural environment that I've seen that mirrors a little bit of the United States. Everywhere else that I've been to, they either have some pretty eccentric laws, or even some laws that almost want to scare you to even go out and town them. The captain would give you a list before you were to go out of do's and don'ts for that country, and they would tell you if you get in trouble, you are under their authority until we can get you out, type of thing. That you're fucked. You got to conform to their rules. So you got to remember that whenever you're in a foreign country, you are the foreigner. So there's a certain amount of mutual respect you have to. I mean, even though we were in some places as service members under obligations such as the North Arabian Gulf, you still got to have a mutual respect for the people that live there. I mean, that's their home. In my opinion, you should. Anyway, I know why I've seen on the camera. I think it was Guam was the first place that I noticed it. And it was because of my camera. I didn't wear glasses at the time. We had air conditioning in the living quarters of the ship and for the mess decks. Well, as we're traveling across and getting into the, near the equator and all that, it gets hotter and hotter. When we get near Guam, and I remember stepping out from the interior to the exterior, and I went to go take a picture. And when I did, the whole thing was it was dew on the camera lens, and there was all this moisture because I had just stepped from this 75-degree weather inside to this 95 plus degree weather, all this fucking humidity outside. That and that kind of heat you start getting acclimated to after a while. But at first, oh buddy, if you ain't used to it, it'll knock your dick in the dirt, man. I mean, I'm here to tell you what, like when we would do VBSS, everyone else, well, not everyone else. Okay, that's a bad example. When we would do things outdoors, exterior, especially the further south we headed towards the equator, most crew members, they would roll up their sleeves or something, let their arms breathe and get a little. I got to the point where I would wear coveralls, one piece coveralls all the time, to where just my hands were exposed because of the sunburn. Doc had zinc oxide, and that shit works, but man, it clogs your pores to where, if I can make this sound right, if you put zinc oxide wherever you put it, it's going to make that area that much more hot, in my opinion. It did for me, because it traps that heat inside your body. It doesn't let you perspire. That I found I was better off to wear full gear, with these coveralls, even though they were dark blue and they weren't light material, that to do that and to get a nice little layer of perspiration, that first layer of it, let it get kind of damp, and I was fine. But I could not, I couldn't go daily with my skin exposed. That's something I found, because it was just way too rough. And I would wear my desert camouflage hat with the drawstring, and wear zinc oxide on my nose and right here, from especially reflections off the water. If I was in the lifeboat, we were doing boardings or something. But other than that, I was covered. Just like one of Muslim women, I was covered, buddy, head to toe. I'd be wearing gloves and everything. Because I'll tell you, it only takes one time, if you ever get burned on the top of your hands, for you to remember that it hurts like a motherfucker. That's the kind of pain you don't want to go through again. And I learned my lesson. It didn't take me long, buddy. So that's one of the things I really recognized that was different, was the climate. But like I say, you get used to it after a while. You take a shower, step out, and you just expect it to just go ahead and just get a little layer of sweat, even though you just got out of the shower. It's going to happen. Now after I get done, like if we were tied off in Bahrain or something, that always fucking sucked, because I'm on the forecastle with an M14 or an M16 9mm, and we get these storms during, they could be at night or during the day. These sandstorms, and man, at first, I thought, that's nothing, After a couple hours, when you can start writing your initials into your forehead into the dust, you're thinking, oh fuck. I mean, that's a lot of sand. Wasn't wearing any kind of breathing protection at the time. Didn't think about it. But yeah, that over in the Gulf, though, like in Kuwait, for example, I went out in town once just to say that I did, and I took one picture. See, because there's certain things about photographs in Kuwait. I think it's that the Kuwaiti people, you can't photograph them. Just like say if I'm taking a picture of you and there's people walking behind you that are local, you're not supposed to take your picture until them people have passed, type of thing, I believe. Anyway, there's one picture that I had taken in Kuwait. I could probably find it on here and share it with you, that I'm flipping off the license plate on the front of a Kuwaiti vehicle. My buddy took a picture really quick, but we spent, I think it was about 3 hours out in town. Me and BM2 Butt Floss, old Mike Highfill, and BM1 Santana. And I was so miserable, went back to the ship. I mean, I think all of us were, because it was a place where, you're there to fly the flag to preserve the freedom because we had just liberated Kuwait, and the city was still trying to rebuild. You know, every other building was in rubble and kind of destroyed, kind of still. But the thing that sucked wasn't, I mean, that sucked bad enough for the local people. I'm sorry about that. But the thing that sucked for me, you couldn't, there was no porn, there was no whores, there was no liquor, no nothing in Kuwait. And you better not get caught with it either, you know, type of thing that, and went out in town, had lunch, came back. If they would have had a liquid lunch, I might have I might have stayed out in town a while, but alcohol was illegal, buddy. I don't know if it still is, but it was then. Alcohol and pornography. And you know what killed me was we would go to Bahrain, I don't know, once a month or something, get some stores and replenish and whatnot. And there's a base there, the ASU, Administrative Support Unit. But we called it the Alcohol Support Unit because they had dollar American beers. They had Budweiser and Busch for $1 a can or whatever. But I stayed away from those. I don't know how true it is. I was, you know, word of mouth was, hey, you know, because you get a headache after you just drink a couple of them. That supposedly they and I don't know if it was bogus information or not, that they put traces of like formaldehyde and whatnot so it wouldn't spoil in the heat, you know, in transit getting shipped over. So I stayed away from the beers at the alcohol support unit, but I did drink the liquor that they had there. And they had whores in Bahrain. But anyway, this is what I was going to say was on the weekends, and because Bahrain was about as westernized as you would get in the North Arabian Gulf on base. You could get booze right outside of the base. You could get whores. The whores would be flown in from Africa or Russia, usually, because you ain't going to get no Muslim whores, buddy. That don't happen. If you're in a Muslim country, there's no such thing because there's strict religious and local laws, you know. So our whores came from Russia. They would be flown in or from Africa. That on the weekends at the hotel, the whorehouse, you'd see like a conference room filled with these guys wearing them long sheets with the Arabian thing around their head, you know, and all this gold hanging off of them, and with their Mercedes Benz parked outside, loaded with money. And there'd be like 40 or 50 of them in a fucking room. And you'd go in, and there would be like one, maybe two belly dancers. And they were neat to watch, man, to see them in real life, you know. But all these guys would have like Tuborg, which is a British beer, big old tall cans. And they'd be smoking, what were Dunhills, Dunhill cigarettes, sipping on Tuborg, and they're from Kuwait in a whorehouse watching a belly dancer. And I'm thinking, these must be the finer cream of the crop coming from Kuwait, because they come in on the weekends, have their fun, and then they ferry back on Monday morning and go to their executive job or whatever, sober, you know. And I just thought that was kind of, I don't know if it was hypocritical or not, really. I mean, I figure that's their business. I'm not here to judge them at this point, but I did think it was kind of like, I just hope they're not going back to Kuwait praising Allah and talking about the great Muslim life that they lead if they're not really doing it. I think that's hypocritical, you know. But I still had respect for all them people that I ever encountered. Because, like I say, I was a foreigner. And you don't, anyway, I just don't figure that you should be ugly to people. So even though I was a service member, I never walked around with chest poked out and, you know, eating nails for breakfast. No, I'm not that hard of a guy. I'm pretty easy going. I figure live and let live, man. We're just here to try to keep the peace. I think that's probably one of the reasons that I felt good about being the part, like with a helicopter crash that I would I got what they call a NAM for that, a Navy Achievement Medal. It's a medal that you wear on your uniform that the captain can grant you, you know. But that made me feel good, you know, because I thought, well, I got an award for saving life, not taking life, you know, if that makes sense. So I think that being in the military during peacekeeping missions are rewarding if in that case where you know you can feel like you saved someone instead of taking someone. You know, can I mean like just just imagine being the guy, and I know that it sounds oh it's just pressing a button, but let's say that you know you got all the coordinates programmed into one of the harpoons. We carried harpoons and SM-1 missiles on my ship. You know, can you imagine being a fucker having to press that button to a place, you know, and go over the mountain around the camel's ass and then destroy, say, you know, whatever, and take civilian lives? That'd be a hard button to press. It wouldn't be as easy as people think. I don't think. Or I take that back. You might be able to press it easily. I don't know if you can live with it easily. You know,
That'll be its own interesting mental health study, I'm sure, in a matter of years, couple of decades. But you mentioned him, and I made a note. Tell me about butt floss.
BM2 butt floss. Mike Highfill, he had already been in about 10 years, I guess. And we were the same rank. He got on specifically, although he was part of our department and whatnot, part of deck division, being a bosun's mate. He had joined on board when we went on our 97 deployment to be another SAR swimmer, search and rescue, because he was qualified. So that way we had two on board because you needed that whenever you were going over. And anyway, the ship I was on, we had three berthing areas for enlisted men: Coop 1, Coop 2, Coop 3. And we called them coops for the obvious reason, like a chicken coop. We were stacked in there, buddy. I think there were 70 or 80 of us in my berthing in Coop 1 with three urinals, three commodes, two showers. You know, so when you got tied off to the pier and the captain rang that bell to go out on liberty, you'd have 60 or 70 some bitches standing there in their fucking in their bath towel ready to get a quick shower and get the hell off the ship, you know. Well, when you got 70 or 80 people taking a shower, you only got two showers, you got a system, you know, a line. So anyway, even though we lived in that type of an environment, and it's psychological, I know, but I have not ever been one that's been able to urinate in front of anyone else. I've just not been able to. I'll get a psychological block and I can't pee into the bottle. So I know that that's an extreme type of thing. Most guys, they can go up there and belly up to a urinal and pee, no problem. Then you have some folks that are just the opposite of where I'm at, right? And BM2 butt floss was one of them. So one day we're out to sea or something, I don't know, but I'm in the bathroom in the head and I'm brushing my teeth. I hear the shower, someone's in there, and I'm facing the three sinks that we have, right? And the mirrors that are behind them. I'm facing that. Behind me are the showers. That water goes off and that curtain draws open. And it was Mike Highfill. And like I say, he hadn't been on board real long. He was brand new to the crew, brand new to the crew at this point. So we were still feeling him out. But he comes out of the shower and he's got his towel in his hand. and he's got his shower shoes on, which are required on the ship. You have to wear shower shoes. You don't ever want to take ever go barefoot on a Navy ship, you know. So he's got his shower shoes on, but man, he doesn't attempt to put the towel around him or nothing, right? Which I'm not offended by. But he comes up, he's coming up from behind me, and he's starting to dry his back off and stuff, you know. Next thing I know, and I'm brushing my teeth, and we're just kind of bullshitting a little, you know, and I'm avoiding, you know, the fact that the guy is naked, right? I mean, it don't bother me, but I'm not really looking type of thing. Next thing I know, because he's working from head to tail, buddy, he takes one of them shower shoes off and takes his fucking leg and hikes it up with the heel of his foot on the countertop of the vanity area where I'm brushing my teeth, and he puts the towel in between, you know, the old nutsack and the butthole, and he's doing the butt floss thing, wringing it back and forth. So I soaked this in a minute, and good conversation, Mike. Yeah. Well, I forget when it was, but it didn't take me long. I had to let the rest of the crew know. I said, man, we got a new nickname for Mike now. Butt Floss, BM2 Butt Floss, because I told him the story. And man, that name stuck with him until I got off the ship, asked to leave. That nickname stuck with him, BM2 Butt Floss, because he had no problem about his junk just flying around and drying himself off wherever he wanted to. That was his home. And hey, that's fine. It didn't bother me either. But I thought it was kind of cool, you know, because that's something I guess I've always needed more privacy than that, you know. So I'm not going to say that there's not times that I've not exposed myself. I mean, fuck, you know, you did it every day on the ship, but I made mine fairly quick usually if I could. He had no problem just letting his junk just wiggle around the air while he's sitting there carrying on a conversation about football and everything else. So, yeah, that's where that name came from. Mike Highfield.
Well, I got you. Well, finishing on I guess a more serious note, more getting back to your present situation and conditions. I know, of course, you've started some therapy sessions, and I think you told me you reconnected with Dan. So how has that all been going for you?
It's been going as good as it can be under the current situation. I think I'm not trying to, I hope I don't bring your Saturday down by telling you this, because I don't want to be negative, but I still don't have a whole lot of hope, but that's because I guess I've been disappointed in the past, and I realize what can happen, that I don't want to count my chickens before they hatch, so to speak, my eggs, you know. But Dan, great. As a matter of fact, I've started seeing Dan again on purpose, and he's a great guy. Been working with me on my rates because he knows I don't have insurance, and I really appreciate that about him, because I want someone to try to help guide me sometimes in certain. I know I got to make my own decision. At the end of the day, I am responsible for me. I get that. And I've got to make some of these decisions regardless. But it's kind of nice sometimes to run some ideas by someone else that I feel like has a better moral compass, let's say, than what I have. My moral compass, it kind of points south usually all the time, you know, or it had through a period of my life. And Dan is a breath of fresh air because we're close to the same age. He's got a few years on me, but so I'm glad for doing that. I'm really glad also to the VA for they've got me in virtual treatment 3 hours a day and at no charge. And what I like about this group specifically is they're veterans. So there's some things that we can talk about and relate to on that level that unfortunately Dan, because he doesn't have the experience with, he wouldn't know type of thing, you know. So I'm grateful to the VA for allowing me to be in this program and for offering it to me, you know, because if it's and what I like about it is they don't have just some humdrum little educational thing and then you fall asleep. And what they've got is for each hour, for the 3 hours a day, they'll have like different aspects of recovery in terms of, say, like, for example, nutrition. Okay, well, if a person has been abusing a substance, or if they've been depressed or have PTSD, they may not be eating right or doing the right things for their body. So, like, you might have certain nutritional things that they'll mention depending on what a person's substance uh, of their choice of substance, whether it be alcohol or drugs, of what they can do that if they aren't stopping to minimize harm. I know I've mentioned that before. Harm reduction is what they call it. There's others, like, for example, on Monday, there was a gal, she's a social worker, that she logged on to be our group coordinator, I guess, for that thing, that she went over healthy and unhealthy relationships. I know that might sound funny to some people, but for me, I was glad that I was able to sit down for it, because Tim, there's some things that you'll go through life about. I mean, I'm going to be 50 fucking years old in 2 years, that there's some things I'm learning about that you don't know that they're unhealthy until someone comes along to tell you on some things. I'm not saying that, you know, I'm just a huge dumbass. I'm just saying that there's some things that that maybe because of a certain way I was raised to perceive certain things, that's the only way I know, type of thing. So when they bring up their different things about unhealthy relationships and isolation, that's another one, you know, because I've been self-isolated. Timmy, I've only left my house 3 times since the first of the year, and and only one time have I driven since the first of the year, and that was only because I had my cousin with me. I wouldn't have driven otherwise, and I was kicking and screaming for those 3 times. So I have self isolated myself. I know I have, and I know that that's unhealthy. But I also have my reasonings that I'll share, like in group and with Dan. They're valid reasons. It's not to say that it's conducive with longevity. You know, you have to have human connection to survive. You have to. I mean, it's since caveman days. People have to have a certain amount of intimacy with another human being. That is something I'm learning now. I didn't know before. You know, about like neuroscience and whatnot. I never knew that, but I can believe it. But my problem is because of my past experiences and what I have experienced, it's made my mindset say, although isolation is unhealthy, for me, isolation is safe because I'm at home. I'm in my comfort zone here. And unfortunately, I don't feel safe anywhere else. I don't feel safe getting in a car. That's why I don't really, that's one of the reasons, besides social anxiety, why I don't want to go anywhere, is because I'm afraid to drive, that I'm going to miscalculate something. But if you think I'm nervous about the idea of driving, you should see me as passenger with someone else driving. It's bad. And I feel bad for whomever, whether it be my son, my cousin Bridget, Margie. There's been a few folks that have driven me around that I get to a point, usually I just have to lay the seat back and close my eyes. Because if I look out the window for any length of time, when we get near other traffic, in my mind, I fear, fear rises like you wouldn't believe. And as we're going through, say, a yellow light going this way, if there's still cars coming this way and they haven't started slowing down, I'm always I'm always,
Catastrophizing.
yeah, there you go. I'm always doing that to situations. I'm always thinking the negative of what can happen. I don't want to think that way. I don't want it to be that way, but it is that way. So I'll be a nervous fucking wreck as a passenger. And I know that. I've learned that. So now I don't even look out the window. I just I lay my seat back and just close my eyes. But that's another reason why I isolate is riding in a vehicle. But as far as social isolation, I don't even go to the grocery store anymore because of like ridicule. You know, I'm afraid now that folks are looking at me and pointing a finger. So that's another reason why I don't want to go out, because I'm too embarrassed. And I know but I don't want to create relationships. I'm glad to learn about the healthy and unhealthy ones, so that way I can learn, because I'm trying to find out in this group. I'm not out for recovery. I'm not in the same mindset as these folks. Unfortunately, I wish I was, because I still self medicate every day. But what I like being with them for and about is to give them information on how I am, let them see how I am, and maybe help me to give me helpful criticism as to what I can do to be a better person, to where I don't run everyone off in my life. You know, I mean, I've been married and divorced 3 times. So obviously I can't keep a relationship with a woman. I mean, after a while, I mean, you can point the blame all that you want, but you got to point the finger back at yourself and say, what could I have done different as a human being to treat this person fair? And that's what I'm trying to find out. I'm trying to get answers to that currently. That's what I'm trying to do.
What are your thoughts on legitimate recovery effort? I mean, going through the withdrawals again, and I guess, is there any glimpse of hope out there?
If if the, if the, if the, if something would transpire from my dealings with the VA, and they come up with some sort of monthly compensation that helps me float my house payment or something, that could possibly change some of my mindset. You know, because I want to be what's the word? I want to continuously try to be open minded, to say that maybe there is hope somewhere. Like I said earlier, I'm not counting on it right now, because that's been my negative thought pattern, unfortunately. And I know that I shouldn't do that, but that's what happens. That I'm just trying to just let it be at the moment. I whenever I start to think about, well, oh, I wonder where they're at in their decision process, or ooh, if I'm going to get, I try to just sit back and say, I'm going to have to let the system just do its thing and see what happens and transpires. But that would be something that I would think would give me a different angle to look at my life from, that might want to make me find a better. And I'm gonna be honest with you, if I went to attempt to be abstinent again, Tim, I think, and I'm sure that the VA might agree, that I would be better off going inpatient. There's a facility 30 minutes from here that I could go inpatient, stay there for a month, because in 6 years I've stopped twice. That one thing I've learned is, especially from this last time over a year ago, well, a year ago now, is that physically, the things that my body, I guess you would say, starts to do, or starts not to do, whatever, after I've been abstinent, I think that, combined with the actual pain, the pain that I endure, I would be better off in the care where they could monitor my blood pressure and things of that nature, and and the pain in my back that I get whenever, because I've tried it here by myself. That didn't work. I mean, cravings are bad enough, but physically, not being able to get up and just tend to myself, to say, run the dishwasher, fucking load up the dishwasher and wash my clothes. It was almost impossible, it seemed. My son's mother came and stayed with me, if you remember, right, a year ago. And I was able to stay abstinent because she did a lot, man. I really owe it to her for helping me, because that allowed me to stay sober long enough to go to the doctor and say, hey, I've got 2 months clean. Help me out to what's going on here. And it was shortly after that is when everything fell apart with my insurance. She went back home naturally, and my things started building up again, my chores and stuff. So I know that if I were to give her a stab again, I personally think that I would be better off asking the VA, hey, you mind if I come to your inpatient program? And I'm sure they would take me. They were willing to take me back in April when my cousin took me there. They were willing to take me then. But I passed until I figure out what's going on with this claim, because that's another thing of something coming back and bite me in the fucking ass. Is it'd be my luck. There's a local clinic right here, a VA clinic. They're only Monday through Friday, 8 to banker hours, but it's a clinic where I could get a primary care person, and establish myself. I'm not doing any of that shit until I figure out where I stand with them because of the financial reasons. Me going on that Friday with my cousin, that was a $50 copay. I've already paid it. But when you talk about going to the doctor, I mean, I'm sure that I don't have to, explain it, that you have certain costs that are going to incur. Well, right now, financially, I don't have a whole lot of extra to just be doling out. I'm spending what extra I've got on Dan, and he's giving me a great rate to help me out. I probably shouldn't be saying that live, but he don't mind. But he's helping me out by giving me a reduced rate, so I can try to get help from him. And I appreciate that from him, man. I really do. Because there's a lot of some bitches that they wouldn't do that. They would figure, hey, if you can't pay the full thing, then you can't come here, And he's worked with me. So anyway, I hope that answers your question.
Well, that'll do it, man. I'm glad things have, at least the tides have seemed to begin to turn for you, in some aspects.
Well, yeah, I was going to say that at least my spiral downhill, it seems to be treading water right now at the moment. So that's better than continuing to plummet,
Indeed. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Well,
hey, man, I want to tell you that I appreciate you letting me get a chance to tell my story, Tim. And like I've said before in the past, it's not to ever glorify drug use or substance abuse or alcoholism, any of that. It's to try to maybe spread the word and make awareness that it does exist. I'll mention something to you that you may, or your viewers may or may not know, but I think that you do know of him. His name is Dr. Carl Hart. What I liked on one of his speeches that he gave, I've watched a few, but on one of them was that he said, and he popped up these pictures on the thing, and it showed like before and after of people that look like monsters after drug use, But he said, this really is not the face of drug use, And he said, and I forget the percentage, but it was high, that he said, most people that use substances are right out here, out in public. He said that they pay their taxes, they don't hit their kids, they live their life. He said, you'd be surprised at the amount of people that do substances in general for daily function. But when it gets to a point where you're not in control anymore, in my opinion, that's when, which is where I'm at, that is when you have a problem. But I do like Dr. Hart's thing, because I think that'll open some eyes up. Like there were some people, a couple, that when they've heard and maybe even yourself, when you first started learning about my situation, I thought, wow, he was out there piloting a boat in this, that there are addictions that can affect people in every aspect culturally. You don't have to just be poor and black and be from the inner city to be hooked on crack anymore. You don't have to just be, a white guy from the rednecks to be hooked on methamphetamine anymore. It can happen to anyone, anywhere, at any time. addiction is addiction, man, and it's a kick in the dick. But anyway, that's kind of my theory on it. Once you lose control and you know you don't have it, that's when it's a problem. And that's where I'm at. I came here 5 years ago to this part of my life, you know. But yeah, on that note, I'm probably going to have me some fine Missouri grown herbal remedies for pain and try to get a few chores done because tomorrow's Father's Day, man. Happy Father's Day to you and Olive and the rest of the furry and your wife, Angelina.
Angelina.
No.
Mm-hmm. Angelina.
Is it Angelina?
Yeah.
Angelina, yeah. Angelina and Olive, because I was thinking of Angelina like the bread down there in the South. What company was that? I thought there was a company that Angelina had a bread. Maybe not. Anyway, I show my New Orleans pride by drinking community coffee, or my Baton Rouge pride, I guess. Yeah.
Well, that'll work, man.
All right, buddy. Well, hey, man, it was nice to bump gums with you. You got anything else?
No, that'll cover everything for now, man. I think we got another 2 hours here. So,
all right.
No, I appreciate your time, man. We'll keep in touch, and I bid you the very best of luck. I hope to see or to hear more from you on progress in the coming weeks.
And I hope to be able to give it to you.
Yes, sir.
Because, yeah. No, I won't say it. Tim, I think that's great, buddy. I look forward to talking to you again. And hopefully I've got good news.
Thanks a lot, man. Talk to you soon.
Take care, buddy.
You too.
This has been a production of Where You At Studios, LLC.